Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Boxed Inside Out, written by Semi Loki. On August 3rd, 2032, at exactly 8:37 a.m., Dr. Alexander Yachty, professor of physics at Lackland College, lost his mind. It was perhaps only the smallest of consolation prizes that he had found his keys at the same time. "Impossible!" he declared, to no one in particular, as he stared at the jagged bits of metal dangling from the key ring in his hand. It was indeed the same set of keys that he had misplaced 4 months earlier. The same missing keys that had vexed him on and off for those same months, and that he had wasted several fruitless hours over multiple days in search of. Here, at long last, he had found them. He had discovered them in a box in his attic, a box of keepsakes that he had set aside after his mother's death 8 years earlier. He had sealed the box at the time, and today was the first day our contents had been exposed to the light of day since evening so many years ago. Yet, the very keys he'd gone missing earlier when the year was safely tucked away inside. "Impossible," he said again. He repeated the word because it was the only one his scrambled mind seemed capable of forming at the moment. It was a good word, a solid word, a word that he could anchor onto the gale-force winds of insanity tore at the tattered remnants of his mind. The word genius gets tossed around in lots these days, so much, in fact, that its original definition has become diluted to the point of meaningless. People can and do apply the term genius to any act of middling skill, no matter how mundane. A garbage man who can empty a garbage bin without spilling the contents may be termed a genius by his peers. Maybe because the term was so overused, many people assumed Yachty was a stereotypical absent-minded professor, a man with his head in the clouds who would, on occasion, forget what lessons that he was teaching his class mid-lecture. Lackland College knew better. Yachty was a genius even amongst geniuses. He was a scalpel for dissecting the secrets of the universe. His apparent distraction from ordinary events was more of a reflection of how little thought he dedicated to such things. He had only accepted the position at Lackland as they were the first to respond to him. Yachty was not absent-minded. His mind was incredibly focused. It was a mind where everything in the universe, from titanic cosmic structures to the most humble quark, all fit neatly together. The keys did not fit, and as such, he lost his mind. "Impossible, impossible, impossible," he chanted, as then tightened his grip on the keys. His knuckles turned white, and the teeth of the keys bit into his palm. He was not a mind that would accept an impossibility. He needed something to ground this fact. Thus, he said the closest thing to profanity in the world of physics. "It must be," he said, with great solemnity, "entropy." With that declaration, his mind began to coalesce into a shadow of his former greatness. He could handle this. He could answer this. He would do both. Yachty stood up and retreated down the ladder into the upstairs level of his split-level house. He had lived in the house for 12 years. However, that was not evident from the way that it was organized, or rather, how it was not organized. There was furniture, mismatched second-hand furniture purchased from the Salvation Army and various yard sales around the city. There were not, however, any pictures on the walls, no knickknacks or memorabilia, no human touches. Most of his possessions were still in cardboard boxes, lurking in the same spot where he had dropped them off when he had moved in over a decade ago. He marched into his living room and continued towards his front door. Beside the door was an end table with a cardboard box that Yachty used to deposit any odds and ends that he'd collected during the day. Books that he was reading, items that he had purchased from the store, his mail, and his phone all were dropped inside. This is also where he dropped his keys. It was where he was quite certain he had dropped his keys 4 months earlier, in fact. Yet, instead, he had found them in a completely different box in his attic, a box that had been taped shut. He lifted the box now and examined it carefully. As was typical for him, the box was quite full. It required both hands to lift it and rotate it for inspection. There were no holes in the exterior. He hadn't expected to find any. However, the inspection served another purpose as well. The box was most definitely an identical size to the one in the attic. Curious. Yachty stepped out the front door and let without bothering to lock it behind him. He often forgot to lock the doors. He walked towards the grounds of the college with a determined air about him. He was still a young man, only 35 years old. If not for the typical disheveled appearance, he might even be called a handsome man. Yet, as was often the case, his grooming practices suffered from the same neglect as the rest of his life. His hair was tousled and unkempt. His chin sported a patchy growth of stubble from where he had forgotten to shave for several days in a row. His shirt and trousers did not match, and both sported prominent stains. Eyes followed him as he walked. He did not notice them. He walked past dozens of people and never registered another human being the entire time. He was focused entirely on one thing: getting to his classroom. There would be a chalkboard there. The equations came slowly at first, but they grew in length and complexity as time passed. Diagrams of cubes framed the edges of the board, as well as intricate geometric patterns. But as the numbers came to him, Yachty felt his grip on the universe come back to him. It made sense. He didn't like it, but it made sense. A stuffed cardboard box, he theorized, was an unnaturally ordered state in a local area. Matter was contained and forced into an ordered state by the cardboard itself. Entropy was key. The universe itself wanted to drop the contents of the box into a lower energy state, a more disorganized and random state. Two similar-sized boxes, therefore, could create a bridge between them which could potentially allow objects to be passed back and forth as the contents of the box sought a more stable energy state. Teleportation. Yachty had discovered teleportation, cheap teleportation at that. It didn't require expensive machinery or exotic matter to force open wormholes. It could be done with ordinary cardboard boxes. Or could it? These equations only proved that it could happen. Making it happen and controlling it were another matter. Could it be directed? Yachty thought about it. Were there any other patterns that he had noticed before? Now that he thought about it, there was. It seemed whenever things went missing, they inevitably ended up right where they most did not want them. If a canister of propane went missing, it seemed to always turn up next to a furnace. A fragile object would appear precariously perched atop a high shelf. Whatever was written on the outside of a box, in fact, seemed to indicate the reverse of where things ended up being. Could it be that the secret that was written on the outside of the box dictated where it went? There was only one way to find out. He'd have to experiment. The biology department was down the hallway from his own classroom. Once again, he marched past wondering students without registering their presence. He had not noticed that the entire day had passed since he had entered his classroom, nor had he seen his own class fill in behind him, only to leave once the bell rang. Yachty's mind was only dimly aware of the physical world around him. Inside the biolab, he located two small cardboard boxes of identical size. Their labels indicated that they had previously been used to store glassware. There was no matter. He located a black marker and wrote on one box, "Do not store live animals inside," and placed it on the side of the room. In the other box, he dropped one of the biolab's white mice. He then sat down to wait. After half an hour of no results, a normal man would admit defeat. Yachty was no normal man. "One mouse does not make the box full," he concluded. "You must be full for the transfer to take place." So saying, he tried to find suitable packing material for the box. He tried cotton at first. The mouse chewed through it. Next, he tried bubble wrap. The mouse almost suffocated. In desperation, Yati finally emptied the contents of the box and weighed the mouse, figuring that whatever was written on the outside of the box was important. He subtracted 3 ounces from the mouse's weight and wrote on the box, "max weight," and then a new figure. He dropped the mouse inside and closed the lid. He sat down to wait. 5 minutes later, he heard the mouse's squeak covering the box. The box on the opposite side of the room. "It worked!" he cheered. "I can teleport items! It works! I invented it!" Well, no, he hadn't invented it, he realized. There was nothing to invent. There was nothing new save for a few scribbled words. No new devices. Once he revealed this to the world, what was to stop someone from claiming that he had just made the discovery first? Yati smiled. "I'll just have to demonstrate it," he concluded. "Demonstrate it in a way that'll prove it for the whole world to see." Yati left the biology lab. He had a lot of work to do before the next launch. Finding 2 identical boxes the size he needed was the easy part. Convincing the shuttle crew to load up an empty box into the cargo bay of the next launch was much harder. The mass of the box was slight, so that wasn't a big issue. The fact that it took up so much room was a larger problem, but not an insurmountable one. The fact that Yati would not reveal the purpose was the major problem. He resorted to begging, bribery, battery, and all sorts of words that begin with the letter B. Finally, he had a date when the box would be launched into space. It was 6 months away, which was not good. But it was scheduled to dock with the perihelion orbital station, which was very good news. He would prove to the world his genius by appearing inside the most remote human habitat in history. For 6 months, Yati was more absent-minded than usual. His classes were almost neglected, as his hygiene. The college sent him a few mildly threatening notices, which he ignored. The threats were never serious, and he would not need the college for much longer, anyway. On the day of the launch, Yati called in sick to work and spent the morning doing something very un-Yati-like. He groomed himself, showered, shaved, and hair-combed. He withdrew his best suit from the dry cleaner's bag that it had inhabited for the past 5 years. His trousers were ironed with a crease sharp enough to slice bread. His shoes were polished, his jacket free of lint. As a final touch, he pinned his tie in place. No sense having it float around awkwardly. Content, he would make a suitable impression. He climbed atop his bathroom scale. 150 pounds. Good. The cardboard box in his living room, he took out his marker and wrote, "Max weight, 140 pounds. Keep contents away from low gravity." He chuckled to himself. He climbed inside and closed the lid. Speech! He should have prepared a speech. He almost climbed back out, but that was when the floor dropped out below him. Cosmonaut Dmitry Pishkin hated poker. The cards floated off whenever anyone tried to deal them. The Americans liked the game, so he tried to ignore the drifting cards. "Draw 2, he said, as the 2 cards drifted away from his hand. John Crothers, an American engineer, passed him 2 more. The radio beat, saving Pushkin from enduring more of the boring game. Crothers turned around and hit the receive button. "Perihelion 1 here," he called. "Identify yourself." "Shuttle Valiant en route," was the response. Crothers smiled. "Valiant," he said cheerfully. "We almost gave up hope. You're 14 hours overdue." "Couldn't be helped," was the answer. "We had a malfunction in the maneuvering thrusters." "Are you all right?" Crothers said. "We're fine, but we had to jettison some of the cargo to make it here. We tried to keep it to non-essentials," the pilot answered, and then inexplicably laughed. "Did you know that some idiot paid for an empty box to be sent up? It's a satellite now. Probably will burn up in re-entry soon." "That'll be a pretty shooting star," Crothers answered. "Better dock, and we'll check those thrusters." "On our way." "Over and out," was the response. End of story. The algorithm reckons you should be watching this video next, and I recommend that you should be always watching my video. So, click with energy! And yes, clicking that does help the channel. Thank you very much. I just want to give a quick thanks to the Tier 5 patrons and channel members. Alithia, Barky, Fudic Yol, Cam Maxwell, Casper Onholtz, White Van 420, Lord Azrakal, Arcalian, and Oakfield.